everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider here inside TCO Performance Center. The show is always presented by our friends at FanDuel. Matthew Coller here, along with Alec Lewis of The Athletic and The Alec Lewis Show. And it's been an interesting couple of days here, Alec, as really the core question of the 2025 Minnesota Vikings is, what happened? How did you end up as a 5-8 football team? And I think that we all know that it comes back to the performance of the quarterback, where if you have the 32nd out of 32 quarterback rating in the league, you will probably end up at actually usually worse than 5-8, where the Vikings are right now. But a debate has sprung up on the internet about pure progression systems and whether the Vikings set up JJ McCarthy for success with the right kind of system. It has been my opinion that what really happened here this season, Alec, was that JJ McCarthy simply was not ready to lead a team with expectations this high, as is the case for many young quarterbacks in the NFL who are struggling this year, and the organization miscalculated that. I don't believe that they have gone wrong in terms of how they have created a system, coached him, tried to get him to improve fundamentals and things like that. But you might have a different opinion. So how have you felt amidst the conversation about scheme and what they have put on JJ McCarthy's plate to this point?
Yeah, first, thanks for having me.
Hi,
Matthew. Good to be here in the beautiful TCO Performance Center. Pure progression. This is the pure progression winner of 2025. That's how I'm going to remember it. We got Kurt Warner tweeting, JT O'Sullivan, Brian Hoyer, Chase Daniel,
Luke McCown.
Any quarterback who really has a social media account has weighed in on a conversation that began Tuesday in this very building with offensive coordinator Wes Phillips about how they teach quarterbacks. I'm not going to get into the minutia of quarter flat, hook dropper, inverted two, because it gets real complicated. But I am with you completely in that if you think that because the Vikings are teaching a pure progression system that JJ McCarthy has struggled in the year 2025, that would be very faulty in my opinion. And I am with you as well in that look, it's easy to forget. This guy transitioned from Michigan, where he didn't throw a ton at Michigan, and that's not a dig, that's just the reality. And then he looked pretty good last year in training camp leading up to the first preseason game. Then the meniscus injury happened. He didn't play for a whole season. Didn't have any on-field time to develop and throw the football. Then he comes back this summer. It didn't look phenomenal. Didn't play at game speed. Offensive line hasn't been healthy. A lot of reasons for the struggles, but it has been, until Sunday, it was an immense struggle. And so for me, more than anything else, it's just a guy who has not had the requisite on-field time, a guy who had questions from the outset about his touch, about his ability to layer the football, about his calmness in the pocket, and all of those questions have come to fruition through the time that he's played thus far this season. But now I think, it's also been, and not to go on a crazy tangent, I think the conversation about simplifying and some of that stuff has been a little some of the narrative has been like, oh, Sunday they finally dumbed down the system against the Commanders. No, they've been running screens. They've been throwing mostly outbreakers for weeks now. They haven't used the middle of the field remotely close to the level and the percentage that they used it in past years. I just felt like the difference Sunday was, A, the defense was pretty lax, and B, JJ McCarthy was accurate with the football consistently for really the first time this season. That was great to see, and I hope it continues, and it'd be fun to see it continue. But that's really that's really my take on that. Like, I don't feel like the Kevin O'Connell all of a sudden was like, let's just change all of our passing concepts. They've really been adapting and trying to make this work for weeks now, and it was the first Sunday where it really showed itself.
Right. They've been a run-first offense at very least since Chicago. And I think if you look at run-pass ratios like people did coming out of the game against Baltimore, the issue with that is that they fumbled the kickoff, Baltimore scored, and then you're playing from down 2 scores, and the same thing happened in Green Bay. So run-pass ratio at the end of the game does not really tell the story of what they were trying to do, which is, in the first half of Green Bay, they were running a very much run-first type of offense and then had to transition to coming from behind and playing and drop-back passing, and that's when Micah Parsons and Rashawn Gary, et cetera, destroyed them in that game. And even in Chicago, they actually did find a way to keep it close, kind of grinded a lot there in that game, and then lost on a kick return that turned into a game-winning field goal. I think the reference to simplification, sometimes the football men and their way of putting things is not always how we do it in society, where when they say that, I think Wes Phillips explained last week that they were talking about like maybe just running some of the same concepts from similar formations and maybe not having, there were plays where they had no motion, which I can't remember ever seeing, but maybe cutting down some of the pre-snap stuff. There was not as many times where you saw him putting his hands on his head and saying can, or check. Also, you don't have to do a whole lot of that when you're ahead for the entire game.
Exactly.
And when you're running successfully the entire game. And when the other team has basically no chance of scoring with the way they're playing offensively.
So I looked this up real quick. I'll let you keep going. But the 3 games where they've played the most offensive snaps with the lead, Commanders game, Bengals game, Lions game. Like that has really, I think over the next 4 games, if you're watching at home and it's like, how's this going? If the Vikings have a lead early in the game, which affects the script of the game, I'd be sitting on my couch feeling comfortable. Like that for me, that is so much a part of this. They were up 2 scores. They could stick with running the football. They weren't a drop back game. Defensively, they could crank up the pressure and create turnovers. Like that is the world they wanted to live. They've had to live, and they haven't been able to live except for the games I just mentioned, really.
I also think something that we just do as human beings is we always look for other explanations to things that are pretty obvious. Like, I think that it is pretty obvious what happened in the 2025 season, but that is a very easy explanation. It might also be a hard one to accept because when you think about the psychology of this, if someone tells you, well, the reality is your quarterback just wasn't ready, and there's still a possibility that it might just not work with him with the way he throws the football and so forth, then that feels very hopeless. That feels very empty. It doesn't feel like
that's right.
You can get your pound of flesh from whoever is here to be blamed for this. Whereas if the coach completely botched the system, then it opens up hope for the player to not have been at fault. And there are enough examples throughout NFL history where a guy got into the right system and had success, or the right environment and had success, that you could say, well, maybe it is the coach. And, look, we can't completely write it off that maybe it was the wrong system. Maybe it was too complicated. Maybe there were too many cans and checks and formations. We also have to remember that he's not a first-year quarterback.
That's the thing.
He's a second-year quarterback. He should know that stuff. I also, when I look at the data, I can't help but think I don't feel like it's even where he's thrown the football. It's how he's thrown the football. It's not that you read a certain thing across the middle of the field. It's that you threw it late or over someone or too hard and it flew on you, and the other team has picked it off because this is a game of extreme precision. But you might also look at that from a lens and go, well, if he has been making a lot of decent decisions and inaccurate throws, couldn't he improve the accuracy? Couldn't he improve the timing with more time on task and make this work? And I think that that's really the big question of the final 4 games is, can you show enough progress to make an argument at the end as we walk out of US Bank Stadium in week 18 that, yeah, he actually he got it. He just needed more experience.
Yeah, and I definitely feel like that is, that's as I show up to whatever you call the Jerry World Stadium, AT&T Stadium on Sunday night. Like, the thing that I'm just looking for is, can he be accurate consistently? Like, it just starts there for me, and it doesn't end there completely, but like, if you can't throw the football on target on an open speed out 12 yards to the left sideline, it's not going to be like, the thing that I've thought is kind of interesting over the last 4 weeks is, if I ask the listener, you guys watching, or you, okay, let's say you're Kevin O'Connell and you're designing the offense. What can I do that he's going to be able to do before Sunday? And you're thinking, well, go balls, he hasn't been crazy accurate with that and it doesn't feel great. Over the middle kind of makes it there's some paralysis with trying to process the field. Out routes, well, he's missing those. Screens, he's kind of throwing them hot. So if I'm Kevin O'Connell, what do I do? And now the hope hope, I think, should be, has to be, will be, that if you can be accurate on some of that stuff, can we start to reintroduce some of the concepts and some of the areas of the field that we've kind of shaved off, and can he feel more comfortable and more confident trying to target those areas over the course of these last 4 games? The hard part within the evaluation of these last 4 is you're playing against the Cowboys defense that even with Quinnen Williams on the back end, they are a disaster. The Lions defense, I believe the last few weeks, they've been like second to last in EPA per play as a passing defense. And then the Packers, we'll see where they are, what are they playing for, et cetera. The Giants defense isn't great. So that's the complex part of the evaluation is the competition aspect of these last 4 games. I'm totally okay, though, if you just go out and perform and are accurate and look comfortable, that's enough for me to at least have more of a conversation about the types of opportunities and players you're targeting this offseason and where JJ's opportunity lives within that.
I will say for Dallas's defense, their numbers are horrendous. They have been getting healthier and I think overall better since Quinnen Williams, but they played a Thursday game with almost no prep against Patrick Mahomes, and then they played against Jared Goff in Detroit. Those are very difficult places to play. So we can't just say, well, hey, these are their numbers over the last few weeks. They're not actually any good. Those are some pretty good quarterbacks under tough circumstances. I expect a better showing from Dallas than Washington by a lot. That is no bar at all.
It was just Donatellish. I mean, that's without Daniil and Zadarius Smith on the front. It was just stagnant. We don't really trust them. We don't disguise. We're playing off coverage. It was the run defense isn't formidable. The linebackers can't really move. I mean, any aspect of the defense, every layer of it, it made it quite easy to watch.
Their best players are older than Phillip Rivers, and their younger players are practice squad guys that have moved up because, there were a lot of injuries. So Dallas is not quite that. They're actually getting more healthy. They've acquired a couple of good players. They have a guy who's really murdered the Vikings in the past in Kenny Clark. So I think there's something to be said for that. Probably not so much the Giants game. And if those last 2 games are meaningful, then I think we could say this is a pretty good sample size. Mm-hmm. And when you think about how funny this is, just how little football JJ's played, the final 5 games will be almost as much as the first 6. I know that sounds obvious, but think about that.
It's true.
To get to the first 6, it took almost 600 days. And now to play 5 games, if he can get through those 5 games and perform at a fairly high level, it could give them some confidence that you can go into next year and build off this. But I want to make one more point.
Sure.
Because every podcast where I talk about this, the comment section is like, why are you defending O'Connell? Is it because you wish you were best friends with O'Connell, or maybe you're afraid of O'Connell? That comes up a lot. And it's not really. It's just a different criticism than you want, I think. Because my criticism of O'Connell was, so I believe, based on Darnold, based on Kirk, even Nick Mullins, this scheme works to get wide receivers open. I believe in that. I've seen that. We see that on tape every single week. We know that to be true. But what I think that the mistake was overestimating what the scheme can do for a young quarterback. Not think about it this way. You plan a trip and you're like, oh, we're going to go to Hawaii. But you never think about that there could be flight delays. You never think about that there could be a storm in Hawaii or something. And you have to, when you plan that, you don't factor for it. And I think when they planned this, they thought, well, we'll give them a great center. We'll give them great wide receivers. But what they didn't maybe factor enough for was Justin Jefferson could get hurt and miss all of training camp, and you don't get any reps with him. Ryan Kelly is not going to be there for you every single game. In ideal circumstances, yes, all that works. Adam Thielen would show up and, well, that wasn't 2018 Adam Thielen, right? And it just, I think that they didn't maybe enough think about the factors that could affect a quarterback beyond what you can control with your system. And just the simple fact that quarterbacks in the year 2025, they get, 9 OTA practices, a handful of full padded, a miraculous joint practice that we all obsessed over. It ain't 1993 where there's 2-a-days and there's 50 passes in preseason. There's just not a lot of time to get that all locked down. And then when you go out there, you have to get it down to the most minute detail that you possibly can. I think they just didn't factor that properly. I think that's the right criticism.
Yeah, I mean, I've thought a lot about this quote that I talked to Nick Mullins late last year, and I was talking to him about Sam and the season he was having. And
I miss you, Nick.
And one thing Nick said was like, what he's doing looks easy, but like what he is doing is so not easy. And I think like that, whether it's Kirk, whether it's Sam, whether it's even Nick Mullins in some of those spots, like what they were able to do throwing the football is just even like in this system in particular, it just requires a certain level. And so, yeah, I think for sure there was an overestimating that JJ McCarthy in many ways would like pick up from where he left off right before the injury and look how he did in that first preseason game. Like maybe the calculus should have weighed in. Like maybe it's going to take him half a year of playing to get back to that level. I mean, the interesting thing that you said was there's 5 games left. It's almost as much as he's played in the first part. Like this is where, can you imagine if JJ played the way he did against Washington in week 5 or whatever, or week 6. And so then you're at week 7, you're staring down the entire back half of the season. There's so much runway at that point to make a much more calculated evaluation. And that's part of the reason those injuries were so they've been so unfortunate. But yeah, I mean, look, the calculus with JJ over with this season into this season, it's so fascinating to look back on. We could rehash it a million times. You've rehashed it a million times. Daniel Jones, nobody expected him to look the way he looked before he got hurt. Sam Darnold, after the last 2 games, like it was really difficult to imagine that. Just the idea that Sam comes back, then any interception he throws, people would have clamored for JJ McCarthy, understandably. And then the Aaron Rodgers, I mean, we could rehash all of that. But I do definitely feel like the one thing I will say, going back to that time, is a lot of conversations with people who sit 2 floors above us who were like, are we really sure this can? And so there was a lot of questioning at that time. And that's where the idea to forge ahead, I mean, that's where why the criticism exists and is relevant and is part of it, just how it is.
So I want to ask you about, because there's like these other 52 guys who have jerseys that we could talk about. So I do want to talk about like who this last 4-game section is important for in just a second. But, when you talk about the front office and I think the implications of a year like this, now, if they win all 4 games and they go 9-8, this will feel like that Lions season that started out 1-6, and it'll feel a lot different. But let's just assume that it's more of a 2-2 type of thing, or 1-3 type of thing. Let's just assume that for the sake of conversation. I have been of the opinion that they created this thing for a 2-year window. They might argue 3, but I would say looking at the players, their primes, the contracts, it's really about 2 with JJ McCarthy to have all of this before you have to start resetting. I think that they should get that. I think they deserve to get that, like the coach, the general manager, the front office. Now, I'm not saying you don't make any changes to your coaching staff. That probably will happen, but that's how I have felt about it, because if you sold ownership on a certain plan, you should see that plan through unless you go 1-16 or whatever. Or if they had lost against Washington and you just lose all the rest of the games and then it's one of the worst calamities in a Viking season history. Okay, well then that's all off the table. But if you're talking about 2 out of the next 4 and you finish 7-10, I don't think that it makes a lot of sense to panic over one season where a lot of stuff went wrong early on and then just start throwing people into the volcano, as Jeremiah Searles likes to say. How do you feel that they should and will approach what has happened here in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. You know how I'm going to go, where I'm going to go. It's hard without seeing the Final Four and how they feel and how they look. I mean, Christmas at home, like if you get obliterated at home against the Lions and then the Packers come into your building and expose you as well, and that leaves you with a certain taste in your mouth. But even as I say that, like that's like short-term oriented thinking. And I've always been this way. Like the more you think long-term and vision and plans, the one thing I will say about this path that they've gone down, and you know this, and the fans listening to this and watching it know this, but the idea was really like, we're tired of being just good and we want to be great. And when you make that leap, you are inviting a vast level of variance in what you're trying to do. And so, like, yes, you're paid to be right. Like, there's no question about that. But the odds would tell you that there is a likelihood that you're not going to be right. And so there is you asked, like, what should they do? What will they do? I mean, as far as Kevin O'Connell, like, I don't think that's a question that really needs to be asked, should be asked. As far as Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, I mean, look, I think Kwesi really has championed a lot of that thought of wanting to be really great. And like the part of this offseason that is interesting to reflect on is, like, in the moment, going back to the spring, what at the time, let's just say your ownership of the decisions they made and the process behind those decisions, what could you have poked holes in at the time? Ryan Kelly, probably. The cornerback situation was a question mark. And then again, like the JJ readiness, that was a very clear, question that a lot of people had. But again, you're fighting that. If you have Daniel Jones or you have Sam Darnold, the noise is so loud. So you're fighting a lot of that. So I would say with Kwesi, like, it's going to be how it ends is probably the season's going to be an interesting conversation. And then I think regardless, and this is offense related, this is decision making related, it really probably would be a great time for certain new ideas, new thoughts, new perspectives, different experiences. Like I still think, as much as the run game was really good Sunday, is the run game as creative as it can be? I think that's a question that I'd really have. From a scouting standpoint, is it great to have continuity? Yes. Is it at times more valuable to have new perspectives, ideas, experiences? Yes. So, like, I think that becomes part of the conversation too. I know I'm weaving a lot of different paths and ways, but I until I see the way the last 4 games go, it's hard to really say. But I do think it is important to be mindful of kind of the vision that was, and the results obviously matter, but the process is worth, like, being mindful of as part of it, if that makes sense. I don't know what you think of that. I'd be kind of curious.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when it comes to going back, there's a pretty clear, like, how much it impacted them to lose the way they did to the Rams. And if we talk about process, is it a good process to have one game go that way and then say, okay, well, this is how we're going to handle this now because that's what went wrong in that playoff game after 14 games? Or, like, is that pragmatic? Not really. Is that, people have asked me about, like, how analytical is this? The answer is, big picture, yes. Like, building around the rookie quarterback contract. A lot of the other stuff is not at all.
Exactly. Like, the Jonathan Allen, the Javon Hargrave.
I mean, Aaron Jones, like you and I mean, we would throw ourselves in front of a bus for Aaron Jones. We're so impressed with that guy, like everybody else is. But is that a, like, dollars to donuts type of good decision? Like,
and it's even not. Like, you could argue, I mean, the late 3rd round pick on Ty Felton, like, you could argue, like, yes, maybe he develops into a player, but at a time where your only current defensive starter that you've drafted since 2021 is Jay Ward, who's not really a starter. He's just a starter because Isaiah, like, would it be nice to have a corner, a safety, or center? So,
well, to me, that pick is not about, like, who they picked, because I still like Felton as a prospect. I think he's talented,
it's
motivated. It's more about like that was your only pick from number 24 to, I don't know, like 746 and not like giving away all of the picks to solve short-term problems in multiple seasons eventually adds up on you, which once again is not really an analytical approach to it, but you're sort of trying to say, well, we're winning 14 games. We can do this. We got to go get Cam Robinson. We got to go get these other players. So it's a product in some ways of the previous success, but also desperation to make it happen in that moment by giving away, a draft pick. And then you get to 2025 draft and you go, oh, we don't have any. So I think that stuff has added up on them when we look forward.
Yeah, the other aspect, and I talked big picture, and I want to think big picture. Well, the draft stuff is absolutely necessary. Part of the reason you're living in the free agency market where you're signing Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave is because in the draft, it's been so barren for as long as it's been. And some of the process in the draft and that stuff is worth questioning, criticizing, all of that stuff. And I mean, I've said it many times, like if you're not drafting well, the conversation, I mean, you can only do so much as an organization. It's just kind of how I feel about it.
Well, for me, you're just not drafting at all. Like you're not drafting any people. I mean, they did in 1 year in 2022, and because it went so sideways, they took an opposite approach, which was we're going to use this draft capital to go get real players. And I think that largely for the rest of the roster, it's actually worked quite well because when we look at a full Minnesota Vikings against a beat up Washington Commanders, and we go position by position, we go, this isn't even close.
Yeah.
This is not. In fact, a lot of us, thought that they would match up well with Green Bay for the same reason. When you looked at the offensive line versus the Vikings D line when it's healthy, versus the Vikings offensive line when it's healthy can probably play toe to toe with just about anybody. If Ryan Kelly is in there, who I asked about today because he was freaking incredible against Washington, it's like, oh yeah, they didn't have some of these guys for part of the season, but the roster is good. And even if you argue depth, I would ask how many teams have a great backup left tackle. They didn't just lose guys. They lost Andrew Van Ginkel, who, oh yeah, surprise, he gets an interception the other day. It's like Harrison Smith. Oh, I'm sorry. Was there some other guy on the roster that was supposed to be Harrison Smith? My point with the drafting is that because they have taken these short-term or very specific window moves, it seems much more dire when you have a season like this than it would have. And the other thing I thought about too was if last year they had gone 8-9 with Sam Darnold and then they did this and they were sitting here at 5-8, it would still feel really bad, but it wouldn't feel anywhere near as bad as it does. So the order of how things happen impacts how we feel about them so much. And I still would argue that if JJ McCarthy could develop to be the 16th best quarterback in the NFL next year with this roster, an added top draft pick, and Quasi's gonna botch it. I know. It's funny though because they haven't botched the top picks. The top picks are all playing well, but except for Lewis Cine, I don't know what he's doing today. Hope you're well. But when it comes to the rest of the roster, they will create cap space. We know that's going to happen. They can make additions. They can draft, I think, a top 10 cornerback and then go from there. I don't think the outlook for 2026 is, holy cow, this thing is on fire. I think it's, all right, this is what you truly planned for. Now let's see it.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting, to assess. I mean, it starts obviously at the quarterback position. Like, are they willing to just, roll with JJ McCarthy and the development after they see the next 4 games and just let it rip with JJ McCarthy in 2026? And what is the level of backup or quarterback you're pairing with that? Or do they feel like, like this path and the trajectory is going to take much longer than maybe we feel comfortable with and shift course and go back to the settle for being good? I mean, I look at it a lot of different ways. I will say, like, this is an old roster, and there aren't a ton of young players for me who are budding. Like, I know there's been a lot of hype around Dallas Turner the last 3 or 4 weeks. for me personally, the tape does not pop as much as the narrative has been on social media or what have you. Like, I didn't even notice him in the game against Washington. And that's nothing against Dallas Turner, but I just think, like, you got to watch the film and be very aware that some of the pressures in previous games have come against tight ends or backup left tackles, and not really a viable tackle that you need to beat on a weekly basis. So from a talent, I mean, again, there are going to be a lot of questions to ask. Again, quarterback, some of the personnel, safety, what happens with Harrison Smith, corner, what do they do at corner, running back, what about Aaron Jones and pairing with Jordan Mason, tight end, TJ Hawkinson, what are they going to do with Brian O'Neill's contract? And then you get to the staff. What's going to be different about the staff? What about Brian Flores? I mean, for me, like,
so many questions.
Yeah, there is a lot of questions. And so I guess to the point you were making a second ago, like, you don't feel like it's, the dire or what have you. Like, I don't know. I just would say that the lack of impact from youth generated from the draft places you in a position where, yes, you can make additions in a really poor free agent class where you're probably shopping with like 28 to 30 year old. It's just not the spot that you want to be making additions in. And then as far as JJ McCarthy's development, until I see the accuracy consistently and an improvement that is drastic over the next 4 games, it's really hard for me to think that 2026 he is going to transition into being that number 16, quarterback in the NFL. Like, I just haven't seen enough for me to feel that way. Now, maybe the next 4 games do it. But I will be really curious, and we've talked about this a lot, like what the quarterback plan is going to be next to JJ, and how and what they choose to do there will inform, for me, the expectations and what's possible everywhere else.
Well, I think that's the point, is that if you got to the end of the season and felt like, all right, I think that there's a pretty predictable path for him to get to that. Like, we've seen enough progress as he's played and we can buy into that. Then it doesn't feel as dire, is the point. If you get to the end and it feels just like this, where you go, well, there was that good quarter, or that game was pretty good, or you had that one game winning drive, but the rest of it was a lot of what you're talking about, kind of all over the place, scattershot, then it will feel dire, because then you are going to have to go out and get someone else that gives you a chance to hang into a playoff race. And that's where you're talking about, like, you're not chasing the Super Bowl, you're chasing keeping your jobs if you have to go out and trade a 3rd-round pick for Mac Jones because you feel like you've pushed the chips to the middle of the table and it's about to go bust on you. And that's exactly where the Vikings were in 2021 when they made a bunch of oddball moves. They brought back Everson Griffin. They signed Delvin Tomlinson to a huge contract. They traded for Chris Herndon, which was just insane. Like, they did a lot of stuff that was very panicky and desperate, which is what you're going to see this offseason from this team if there's not a lot of confidence that JJ McCarthy could be the guy.
Well, and the other aspect too, besides like keeping your jobs, or like, how this ownership is, they have not been willing to stomach the potential 2-15, 3-14, 1-16. And so, like, it would be a major dice roll to just be like, you know what? This is the guy you drafted. Give it an offseason where he's healthy, hopefully entering the offseason, to work on the mechanics and let it rip next year and see what happens and see if you could make it work. That would be kind of a departure, I think, from how this ownership has typically acted. It would be kind of a leap, but then it would put you in a position where you either probably figure out you got the guy and guys, or whether you're picking highly in the draft, where if you were picking highly in the draft in 2024, you'd probably feel much better about the situation that you were in right now. So, like, I frame it oftentimes like, the executives and the coaching are often thinking about their jobs, but there's no question that ownership plays a big role as well in terms of the roadmap that teams and executives and coaches ultimately take.
I did this as an article once. I interviewed a bunch of people about if coaches and GMs were given terms as opposed to like year to year, which is really what it doesn't matter if they have extensions. The owners have money. It doesn't matter. But if they were given like 5-year terms and you had to keep them in their jobs for that long. Like, how would they approach things differently? And I think every team, except for the ones with Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Lamar Jackson, would be thinking about much more long term. This is also a theory about why things work for the Packers all the time, is because they sit Jordan Love for 3 years and they just are comfortable having a season that's 9 wins with Aaron Rodgers if it also means Jordan Love is developing over that last year.
Here's the other thing too. Like, let's say JJ the last 4 games, it looks okay. There's spurts, there's not. And then you're like, okay, but we're going to get a guy who can compete with JJ, like you probably sign him with certain guarantees or what have you in the next season. Then that guy plays. Well, then you got 3 seasons of JJ's rookie contract now over. You got to make a decision on the 5th-year option. Are you going to turn to him in the 4th? This third, that's the other aspect of this. It's not his 2nd year that he's entering. Right. It's his third. It would be his 3rd season. So it complicates things even further from that standpoint. But you doing that story is interesting. It's like Sam Presti with the Thunder can always take the long-term view.
Yep.
And that's why they've been able to accumulate as many picks. And when the more picks you accumulate that are premium picks, the more likely it is you're going to hit on some of those picks. You're probably going to miss some, but you're definitely going to hit others. And it's so... that's why the ownership conversation and the guys looking out for their it's a relevant conversation that impacts team building on a year-to-year basis.
So this is exactly what we're talking about. Why my take has been that the Wilfs should tell them no Mac Jones, no Geno Smith. Sure, get a backup, have Carson come back or have whoever. It doesn't matter. Somebody, right? If his shoulder ever heals from that beating that he took. But, the point is just a backup. You get a backup, it's fine. But you have to live or die with what happens with JJ McCarthy next year. And here is why. Because when I look at the NFC North, is Detroit going anywhere? Probably not. Not next year. Is the Green Bay Packers going anywhere? No, they are still going to be really dang good. And the Chicago Bears have a head coach that has clearly proven that he can do the job, and a quarterback who, while is not perfect still, is an ascending young QB who can improve his throwing as well. They also have cap space to work with in the future. You are not playing in some sort of AAA league here. This is the big leagues of the NFC North, and if you're going to have it click and go to the playoffs, you got to be really dang good. You can't be, let's have Mac Jones try to manage games and get to 8 wins or 9 wins. Good. You got to fight with the big boys. And I am very curious to see, and I think we've reached the point to talk about if Brian Flores is going to come back, because his defense has been amazing again this year. Everyone's seen it. The way that they shifted in the middle of the season to solve problems. They went to an old school 3-4. The way that they've played with everybody healthy. If I'm another team around the league that is in a bad situation and my owners have lots of money, I'd be calling Brian Flores' agent and be like, come save us. Because, I know the Bengals don't have any money, but imagine the Bengals. Come save us, Brian. And he probably can. So that's interesting. But let's talk about the final 4 games and who else on this roster you want to get answers on.
Fun conversation. You didn't prep me for this, so I'm kind of thinking about it over the course of my head. First and foremost,
this is a no prep show, by the way. Yeah, your prep is every day.
I know that's true, but you're sometimes off the top of your head, you know how it goes. You
naming guys, right, and naming stuff. Yeah.
Look, I've mentioned some of the positions that for me are worth eyeing: corner, safety, running back, tight end, tackle, center probably. Those are the positions that I've kind of looked at. I think it's going to be interesting to see TJ Hawkinson. How does he finish the season? What does that look like? Jordan Addison and Jalen Naylor. I don't want to say something crazy probably that's going to get aggregated, but I think Jalen Naylor has been so good this year.
Yeah, I agree.
And he's going to be a free agent. And what ballpark is he going to be living in? Probably 12 to 14 million in average annual value. Whereas Jordan Addison, he's going to be eligible for extension. What is his ballpark? 23-ish to, I don't know.
Isn't he a guy you 5th-year option and wait?
Yeah,
rather than the extension, because you got to see off the field.
Right. But I would ask a question of would you consider being willing to part with him for picks and go with a different strategy to kind of rejigger the cap and where you're allocating funds like that. So like those two guys, I'm watching a little bit. I don't know. I'm probably missing some obvious ones like Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave. Can those guys prove that they should be on the 2026 roster? Ryan Kelly, same deal with him. Although I mean, look like Javon Hargrave, you cut him, you can save $11 million in cap. Ryan Kelly, you cut him, you save $12 million cap. Like those, that's kind of where my mind goes with players. Who am I missing? Who am I forgetting? I know there's something I'm missing here.
It's a bit of a trick question because there really isn't anybody outside of JJ McCarthy. I mean, that's the point about this roster is that
I did a good job, though.
You did, yeah. You went through, I think, the whole roster. You didn't mention Ryan Wright and his coffin corners over. He's had a great season, by the way.
Special teams is 9th in DVOA.
Miles Price, I'd like to see some more returns.
I don't know.
Maybe I'd like to see him actually get the ball in the game. You know, maybe
they had him. Remember, there was like a play against the Seahawks early in the game where Miles Price was in the backfield, and you weren't there. I was in the Seahawks press box, and I was like, "Is that Miles Price in the game? Like, what's going on with that?" Yeah, I don't know, but
that is the problem with analyzing the final four games, though. Is I mean, we're not looking Jay Ward. Like, is he going to play a lot more? I mean, but this seems like an inconsequential.
Yeah, I mean, it is. That's why I was struggling so much.
We've already decided on Jalen Redmond is awesome, and I guess they're going to have to decide whether to bring back Eric Wilson after he's been such a good fit with the defense. He's been fantastic, but if Brian Flores goes elsewhere, then does that make the same amount of sense to pay him based on this season?
I mean, can you imagine the idea of that happening and then the coordinator, new leader, new play? I mean, like beyond everything else, I just can't even imagine the mayhem that would be.
I mean, it's possible. It is certainly the door is open for that. You could say, you know, a Theo Jackson if he comes back. Like, is there something there? But I think we've decided on everybody except for 9. Like, that's the only person that we don't really have a really good sense for. Like, we could start the offseason today on everything else, which we kind of did with this conversation, everyone else. So now, one last question for you, because sure. I don't have a great answer either. I mean, like Ben Sims, there are just no players that we're finding out about. Donovan Jackson, I've already decided. I think he's dang good. Like, I think Donovan can really play. So it's really here's what I like about the situation though, or the last 4 games, and it requires this lasting for 4 games. They have enough. They have the receivers healthy, the line healthy, the running backs healthy. They have the bad defenses that they're going to play over the next couple games. Everything is there. If you can't do it now, you probably might not be able to do it. So here's a question for FanDuel. On FanDuel, the odds have moved a little bit over the last couple days. The Vikings are now plus 550 to win 8 games this season, to finish with 8 wins, which would require, if you want to do the math, 3 of the last 4.
That was maybe uncomfortable.
Can they do it?
Yeah, they can for sure. Yeah, they can. Definitely. I mean, like, and I think the formula has to be you get up early in games, you run the football well, your offensive line stays healthy, you force some turnovers. Like this Dallas game for me it's definitely winnable, but like tackling Pickens and potentially CD on the outside is not going to be easy. Dak is capable for sure, but their defense is really gettable. The Giants game, I think that's a very winnable game without question on both sides, and I would have much more confidence in this staff to have their guys ready than Mike Kafka. Week 17, Christmas. The Lions, I haven't felt great about the Lions all year. Like I was asked on the radio maybe like 6 weeks ago who I thought was going to win the NFC North. I don't feel great about their interior offensive line, and they need the interior to be great for that quarterback in particular. And then the defense always feels so volatile to me with how they play. So that to me is a winnable game. And then are the Packers, what are they playing for week 18? So you could get to a spot for me where it's definitely possible. I'd probably predict 2-2 would be much more feasible. in my mind. But I think it's possible, don't you?
If they get to 8-9, it's going to be a very weird thing to analyze because it's going to be like, well, it's like I've seen worse, and but it's certainly not good. But then if you won
what's
8
crazy
games with quarterback who was injured and was struggling, and then came out of it.
The craziness is how many teams throughout the league are going to have that same feeling at the end. Like, think about Miami. Like, it was a mess. Now they're running the ball like it's like the greatest show on turf run game with Aaron Brewer, the centers pulling. The Chiefs, it's been a mess of the highest order, but they could finish. So, I getting to 8-9 after all of this, if we get there. I mean, holy cow, we've got 4 weeks left. I don't know if I'm going to do the best I can. But yeah, it would be wild, and it would frame off-season stuff in a very interesting way. And that's, I mean, like, the hard part for me is, and this is kind of a tangent, but I've had so many conversations with people, and they're like, well, what do you do? What do you in the offseason? And it's like, to wrap my mind about the direct plan and approach that the path that they need to go down has been hard for me to really like conceptualize. And maybe that's because I don't have all the information because there are 4 games left, but I wonder if you feel that same way.
Well, I think because I came up with a take that none of you guys could pick apart in the media room the other day, I feel very good about where I stand with what do you do? What do you do is the same thing you just did. There's nothing else to do. You roll with JJ McCarthy. Unless, look, if he goes 0-4 and it's just atrocious, then I'll change the take. But if we're going with 2-2, like, all right, you go with JJ McCarthy and you spend and you adjust cap and you sign free agents and you draft someone high and you do it again. Because this was your plan, so...
And then, like, let's say you get to
what other plan is there?
Okay, so let's say you get to week 5 and Justin Jefferson is just apoplectic about what's going on. Then what?
If it played out the same way next year as it did this year... all the plausible deniability is out the window. It's a young quarterback. Well, he hurt his ankle. Well, this guy, the left tackle was, it's like, okay. This would be.
But what if week 2 he hurts his ankle? Then it's like,
then it becomes
the
a
availability
results-based league at some point, right? Like that's what it becomes at some point. Is it like it's W and L. This year, there's a lot of explanations and excuses to be had. And including that they missed on how much McCarthy would have to learn about really playing in real games. There will be no excuse for that next year. There will be he was recovering and he only got to throw the ball in January. Well, no, he's going to be able to throw the ball all the way through the offseason, through the ball all this year. He's going to be able to work with hopefully a new quarterback coach who isn't online, and we'll see, where it comes out. But I would do free agency the same exact way, where you're looking at veteran players who can fill spots. You're looking at trying to cover up every single hole, maximize the total roster strength around McCarthy, and give it a shot. Because there's no other way. There is a way that saves your job, which is that you trade for Geno Smith, and he's just good enough to get you to 10 wins and just good enough to make you interesting. But you're going to get pummeled in the playoffs again, and then we live in a simulation, and it will just feel like, why did we do any of that? Why did you do any of this? Why didn't you just keep Kirk if you were going to do that, right? Or
I'm just playing out the string on this, right?
Yeah.
So let's say, again, the next 4 games, it's pretty rough.
We're saying 2-2 isn't pretty rough? Like a
1-3. Like it's rough.
All right.
And then you're like, okay, we'll trade a 3rd-round pick for Mac Jones. And then Mac comes in and you win 10 games, and then it's like, well, we can act if we draft well around Mac, maybe. Like, what? Then do you feel like you can't stand this because you just think there's no?
Well, I have to be consistent, at least to some extent. When we do this many podcasts, it's hard to sometimes. But thanks for the people who pointed out. When it comes to Kirk Cousins, what was my main gripe? It wasn't that I didn't like Kirk personally. He was great to deal with for us. It was that I felt like they would never be able to, under those circumstances, with him as the quarterback, take another step to being a true Super Bowl contender. And if you trade for Mac Jones, and I was like a Mac guy back in the day, like I thought he was going to be good. And so this year I was kind of like, ooh. But that was based on the idea of the rookie quarterback contract for Mac. It was not based on going and trading an asset and then maybe even having, if he plays well and you win 10 games, then you have to sign him to an extension. And then, like, where are we?
Right.
Just in another version of hell.
For the record, like trading a pick. Okay, well, you need that pick because this team doesn't have enough young players that are developing. So you need the pick. Mac Jones, like, again, and what does it look like in this system and in this? Like, I'm not. That's not a recommendation. It is just like your take is interesting because I mean, having a hard time. I've had a hard time coming up with the roadmap beyond that specific approach, kind of in some way.
Just follow the road wherever it shall take us is my take, and we'll see if they actually do it. But so much will be determined in 4 games, which is also a really stupid way to make decisions.
Exactly. But what choice do you have when the injuries and I mean what choice do you have? Like that's the hard part. Similar to the Darnold thing last year. It was a 2-game sample at the end, but it was the magnified, important, integral 2 games. It's hard not. You said psychology at the beginning of this podcast. Like to remove yourself from that would be inhuman. So it's tough. It's interesting. It's fascinating. I'm curious to see how it looks Sunday night in Arlington, Texas. I really am.
Me too. Alec Lewis, the Alec Lewis Show, The Athletic, and peer progression expert now. So
I love that whole thing. By the way,
oh, it's it's.
I'm learning about football.
Really,
that was the thing when I cover baseball. People were so willing to teach you about the game.
Yep.
In football, it's less been like that. And so I mean, on a serious note, to hear how they teach the passing game is cool. And insightful. So, yeah, the arguments are fun, too.
We have taken a quarterback school this year. And that's the great thing about this game is that whenever you think, like, I know a lot of football, then they remind you that there's a lot of football you still can learn. So we have technique, fundamentals, how to throw a football properly, how the progressions work, how it's advanced defensively, which has caused the offense to have to find answers for it, and et cetera, et cetera. We've learned a lot. We'll never forget 2025, regardless of the record. All right, Alec, thank you for your time.
Anytime.
Thanks, everybody, for watching / listening. And, football.